Well, the leaves are starting to come out on the trees and the flowers are all sprouting. It's April in Cleveland. What's going on with the real estate market? So my name's Ed Huck with Keller Williams, and I'm going to give you your market update for April of 2026. So let's dive into this here. Mortgage rates. So mortgage rates, if you look and you can kind of really squint and see that at the beginning of the month, the rates actually had kind of ticked down into, and especially in March, they were actually right in the high sixes, in the high fives, and then they kind of ticked back up. So, and then they were in the mid sixes, and now they're down right about 6.3. So they're hovering right around that 6% mark for a 30-year fixed. Number of new listings. So new listings this year to date versus last year to date, we're up a little bit. So we're up about 1% versus last year. The number of homes available for sale, though, is up 4%. And keep in mind, this is all of Lorain, Cuyahoga, and Medina counties. So we're up a little bit for a number of homes that are actually available to see. Number of homes that have gone under contract this year to date versus last year to date. Pending sales are up about 4%, which is great. And number of transfers is actually down this year. But why I'm not concerned is because the number of pending sales is up. That will almost make up for that whole 6% of how many we're down this year to date. So what it tells me is, and what we've been able to see is this February, things really slowed down as far as homes getting under contract, but March was really busy. So that's kind of made up for our slow February. Busy this March versus last March. So you can kind of see here pending. So pending is under contract. So it's the month that the house goes under contract. And if you were to look to see this March versus last March, we were up 10% on this March for as number of homes went under contract, which again makes up for our slow February that we had. Average sold price is up 10% this year versus last year to date. So homes are still appreciating. So if you're sitting on the fence waiting for home prices to slow down going up, you should get into the game and buy a house, because we had plenty of folks last year say, I'm going to wait for the rate, for the home prices to cool off. Well, they've not cooled off. Days on market, average days on market is up, but when you look at the actual math, it says up 2%. It's only up 1 day. So it's taking one extra day longer to put a house under contract this year versus last year. So it's really kind of negligible. Months worth of inventory is even. And this is how we gauge how long it takes for our current level of inventory to go off the market. And right now it's averaging about 1.5 months. If we look at the next graph, you can see that line where it says 3 months, right where that 3 is. Anything between 3 and 6 is a neutral market. Anything over 6 months worth of inventory is a buyer's market. I couldn't even fit it on the graph. The interesting thing, though, is if you look at, we've been a seller's market since about 2017. You can really see how strong of a seller's market when that yellow graph went way down. We kind of peaked, let's put it that way, for our seller's market in 2020 and 2021. If you look at those, and the reason you see those ups and downs, those kind of wavy motion is, in the winter, it takes a little bit longer for our inventory to sell off, so that's why you see that peak go up. And then in the summer, the market absorbs these new listings a lot faster. So that's the normal cycles that we see. But if you look at the bottom of every one of those summer cycles, if you were to call it that, it's going up. So our month's worth of inventory is starting to show definite signs that things are starting to head towards that neutral market. Now the challenge is we're still so far below that neutral market line, and at this rate, it could take 4 years for us to get back to neutral. So don't hold your breath and think that, okay, if I'm gonna wait 2 years, all of a sudden there's gonna be a ton more inventory. I don't see that happening. partially because we're not building enough homes here locally to help absorb the actual people that are looking to buy houses. So back in the market. So the story this year has been, and the end of last year, is how many homes are coming back on the market. What that means is after a buyer and seller have agreed on a price and terms, that a record number of those sales are falling apart. So today the average is 13 to 16%. A year ago it was 10 to 13%. Normally it's 5 to 10%. So September of 25 was one of the highest we'd ever seen at 15%. And then December, past that, 16% of all sales that were under contract fell apart. And then in January, it was almost 14%. So why is that happening? So one big challenge we've seen locally has been that buyer's remorse. So buyers, especially in certain price ranges where it's still really competitive, they'll make an offer, they'll have to go up over asking price, they'll win the house in multiple offers, and then now all of a sudden start to get cold feet, and they have, again, buyer's remorse. They can't believe how high they paid over for the price for the house. So they start second guessing themselves. They do the inspection, and then now all of a sudden, once they do the inspection, small things all of a sudden become a huge trigger, and then they use that as an excuse to get out of the sale. So we're seeing that a lot. And then appraisals. So as the market moves faster, it's moving faster than the appraisers can move. So the appraisers have to use comparable sales of houses in the last 6 months, and they have to be, very similar neighborhoods, similar school districts, etc. And because buyers are bidding these houses so high, it's hard for these appraisers to find 3 comparable sales to justify that value. So we're seeing a lot of homes that are under appraising. So again, then buyers are using that as an excuse to either renegotiate the contract or get out of the contract. So it's been a big challenge. So what sellers must do to kind of protect yourself is, number one, list your house with us, and we'll be able to help coach you through that to make sure it doesn't happen. But price it right from day one. Prepare the home properly. Reduce the risk up front by maybe doing a pre-inspection, so you've kind of eliminated a lot of the concerns that any buyer might have. And then create strong buyer demand early, and in the negotiations, maybe work in an appraisal gap addendum. Or maybe even, not to talk a buyer out of a home inspection, but have a buyer put a clause in the purchase agreement that says, if any repairs are under $2,000, the buyer's not going to ask seller to make any of those repairs. So there's a lot of tricks that we can use, or tactics, we'll call them tricks, that we can use to help protect our sellers. For sellers overall, so for the rest of the year, it's still a strong seller's market. It's just not the free-for-all it was back in 2021 and 2020. And if you're over under $300,000 or $400,000, still for a great house, you still could probably expect multiple offers. Low interest rates should bring more buyers out this spring. I don't see the rates moving much more though. Again, we talked about there's not enough new constructions. Buyers are asking a lot more questions now up front. Again, we talked about appraisals. Experience counts more in this shifting market. Again, because of all these sales falling apart. And in other parts of the country, the market has really shifted. Texas, parts of Florida, Arizona, it's turned into a strong buyer's market. Again, we're going to keep our eye on it, right, and see if that happens in our area. For buyers, again, the higher price ranges, you might have a little more negotiating power, especially if a home has been on the market for more than, say, 2, 3, 4 weeks. In that instance, a lot of times the sellers are willing to negotiate, especially if they've been on the market for a while. What else? Again, don't expect interest rates to come down below 5% anytime soon. Let's get out of here. All right, so in review, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or your favorite Ed Huck Team Realtor. And enjoy the rest of your spring. Take care.